Hello and welcome back to Eye on Marvel. My name is Peter Levi, and today we are going to do the video version of the MCU News Digest I dropped yesterday. Timestamps will be down below, along with a link in the description for the original article. A reminder to like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, blah blah blah, YouTube algorithm, Illuminati, I don't know. I can't think of other conspiracy things. Basically, it just helps the channel in the algorithm. We can hope for the best. People, they want to see my pale face talking about Marvel. I can just tell. So before we get into the news element, some brief non-spoilery first thoughts on Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode 5. As you know, if you've been watching me for a little while, I prefer to give my final opinions when I've seen it twice. I've only watched it the first time, and I do tend to be a little harder on things the first time through. But for me, this episode was a downer. Pacing problems, the plot problems it had coming in continue. It's not terrible by any means, but yeah, this one was a bit of a slog. With one episode left, I have a hard time seeing the finale that I think Marvel wants. I think for this episode and for what the show is aiming for to work for you, you have to have wanted that so bad that anything will do. Because yeah, I'll go through it in my full review, which will be its own thing. But yeah, and the cameo. we'll get to that. We'll get that in a bit. Anyway, though, so yeah, for me, disappointing. Not terrible, but disappointing. So on to the news. And we're actually going to start off with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Popularity through the first 4 episodes. So hard numbers take quite a while to come out. And even social media trends can take a little while too. But Google Trends is available to all of us. It only takes a few days. So I've been watching the numbers of Falcon and Winter Soldier on Google Trends and noticed something interesting about differences in the worldwide response versus the US response. Of course, when we say worldwide too, Google's not in China, so we're not getting that, but that aside. So the first episode hit big. It was even bigger than the first episode of WandaVision, not by a huge margin, but it was bigger. Pardon me. And then it had a precipitous drop. This drop was 50% worldwide, which is massive. Smaller than that in the US, it was 35. Not as bad, but not great. Episode 3 had a little bump worldwide, while it went down to the lowest point for US. And then episode 4, little dip worldwide, big jump in the US. And I think that response is pretty understandable. The show is really Falcon's show. It's there for him to become Captain America. He's Captain America, not Captain World. So I think the target audience is more US than it is worldwide. And if you look at the little things that they've done in the show, like having the Wakandans show up, for those who don't know, Black Panther's enormous box office was very American driven. That's the place it did best by a substantial margin. So again, appealing to that audience. How episode 5 will fit into this paradigm, I'm not sure. And of course, this doesn't include actual numbers, so we can't quite compare apples to apples with, say, WandaVision or other shows. One kind of funny thing was for several weeks, 2 at least, I think it's been 3, Malcolm Spellman's been teasing a cameo in episode 5. What's the cameo? What's the cameo? They're really trying to drive up interest. But because of all the not bitterness, but just displeasure over the mystery boxes in WandaVision, pretty much no one has taken this up. Like, this has become a meme, essentially. People have just made fun of it the entire time. And when I saw the cameo, I was like, oh my god, no. For the salad days of Ralph Boner, please. Like, that was painful to watch. That's not going to get better with a second viewing. I'm sure there's a few older fans who are happy with that. But that's the kind of cameo that gets executives and producers excited. I don't think Marvel fans are going to care one way or the other. Again, maybe if they're older, but that's about it. Another thing I wanted to bring up was the anemic Flag Smasher plot. It's, you know, even from people who like the show more than I do, and I like it. I like the show. I'm not a hater at all. I just wish it was better. But one of the things that is worth bringing up is the show had reshoots, and those reshoots absolutely impacted how the Flag Smasher plot was done. We know it was about a virus, and we can kind of piece together what that original plot was. Originally, it seems the power broker was someone who created a virus. Now, whether this virus gave people powers or not, it's not clear. But it's a virus that was potentially at least deadly. Maybe it was always deadly. Again, hard to say. And that's what ultimately kills Aaron Kellyman's mother figure, whose role was pretty much cut out of the film. And so that's what their plot was going to be about. It wasn't going to be about them in the GRC, not really, or at least not in the same way. And it must have been more coherent. The reshoots have not really been able to address that properly. Trying to follow the logic of what the Flag Smashers are doing and getting any sort of interest in their opponents who are the GRC, who we only see for the first time in episode 5, is, you know, it's pretty bad. And while you might want to give them a pass for that, it's a choice they made. They could have just stuck with the virus plot and not freaked out because of the pandemic. Just expected their fans to be adults and understand that there's a difference between fiction and reality. And I mean, I feel like, I don't know how much better it would have been. I'm not going to be clamoring for a Spellman cut of the show. But yeah, it is worth keeping in mind that one of the reasons the Flag Smashers are so dull is because their plot was changed at the last minute. But again, I wouldn't give that as a pass for anything that you dislike about the show. So on to hard numbers. WandaVision. The Nielsen ratings for the week after its finale are out. And I was taking a look. I was curious to see where it stacked up with other streaming shows. Nielsen covers Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon. It doesn't have HBO Max for Snyder fans. But the big three are all there. So how is it doing? For a successful show, I would think just a week later it should be doing very well. Where was it? 11th. That's against other shows, not against movies. I don't know if I'm Marvel that I'm happy that reruns of Supernatural and Grey's Anatomy are beating me. I wouldn't be happy with that. But, you know, they're going to be more concerned with subscriber numbers. And because WandaVision doesn't have to sit there for months with people thinking about it, you're transitioning to something else. You probably don't have to worry about it too much. I do hope, though, that this means no more Jack Schaefer in the MCU. That's something I'm hoping for. Next up, so movie news. Shang-Chi. More leaks. We got a description of Zailing. I think that's how you say it. Here's the quote. When her estranged brother Shang-Chi suddenly shows up in her life, Zailing must choose between the solitary life she's created for herself or join her brother in the fight against the Ten Rings. So the actress playing her, Manger Zhang, is 40 years old. So she's 9 years older than Simu Liu, who's 31. This is trivial in a way, but so often when you have like a male action lead, if they have a sibling who's female, it's usually like the spunky younger sister, you know, there to provide some hijinks and comedy. And here instead they've gone with the older sister. And I suspect the reason for that is they brought in Aquafina, I forget her character's name, but she's going to provide that comedic energy, so you don't need that from the younger sister. In the comics, it is a younger sister, incidentally. Although whether she provides hijinks, I don't know. I've never read Shang-Chi, so I couldn't tell you. Next up, we had some interesting things about Wolverine. So obviously we've had no announcements at all. We know he's coming along with the X-Men. We don't know too much more than that, but we had technically three supposed scoops. So let's go through the one I think is BS first. This comes from that hashtag show, Nick Santos, a guy with no credibility at all yet, And he claims Wolverine is going to be a Disney Plus series. And here's the quote from him. Marvel is aiming to adapt the famous Weapon X story for the first season. Not too much else is known other than that this will cover Wolverine's origin story, his time in the Weapon X program, and ultimately what shapes him into Wolverine. Since this will now be set in the MCU, expect references and allusions to other MCU projects. As this is an early development, this is the writing phase, so no cast, no director, or showrunner has been chosen. Although the search for all is still underway, Marvel is hoping to have something to announce this year sometime. So he's in a way he's put the credibility gun to his head by saying we'll get an announcement this year. Now, what's weird about this, before I go into the specifics, is why would you put something as popular as Wolverine in a streaming service? If that were to be the case, it would be a sign that the Disney Plus is moving away from the theatrical model more into the streaming model, that the streaming numbers are more important. Because a Wolverine film, even a bad one, will do quite well, especially with the MCU label on it. In terms of the specifics itself, by the way, I think when he says the Weapon X story, he's probably talking about the Barry Windsor Smith story from Wolverine's solo comic. It's from 1991. I'm not a huge fan of that specifically, although it doesn't inherently invalidate his original origin. It still takes away the distinctive elements as far as I'm concerned. It's just him with some nameless scientist dudes, capturing him, forcing him to go through the process. He gets out. Like, it's not that interesting given what else you could do. But yeah, so that was Santos's scoop. Again, no track record previously, and for that to be the case, you'd have Marvel signaling in a very direct way, like, hey, streaming matters more, because Wolverine films are just such an easy way to make money at the box office. So right away after this, Mikey Sutton dropped two different scoops. So he's already talked about what the first Wolverine film will be, that it's Wolverine, the Incredible Hulk, and Alpha Flight in Canada. So echoing both his original appearance in Marvel and also his original interaction with Alpha Flight. I think it's a great idea. I hope that's true. His scoop here is actually about a second film. And he says this will borrow from Chris Claremont's original solo series, not the limited solo run, but the solo series that starts in 1988, where Wolverine takes on the identity of Patch and has adventures in Madripoor. And Sutton says that this will sort of have a piratey feel, pirate adventures, not Wolverine on a boat fighting ships, but and then villains like Tiger, who's a crime lord in Madripoor, will appear. Now, I had no idea who Tiger was, even though I've read that that run. Did not remember at all. But that aside, and yes, I realize it's kind of ridiculous that Wolverine put a patch over his eye and expected people not to recognize him. If I recall correctly, there were some pretty funny jokes made about that within the comic run. Just like when Grey Hulk tried to be Mr. Fix-It, and everyone just pretended to go along with it because he's the Hulk and they don't want to get smashed. But that aside, so he says that's what the second movie will be about. Wolverine having adventures in Madripoor, essentially. His second post was about Hugh Jackman returning as Wolverine. So Sutton says originally when he was asked, he said no. He didn't want to impact the legacy of Logan. But they kept going back to him, and I guess they were like, okay, you're not going to be that Wolverine. You're just going to be a different Wolverine. And so apparently he's potentially interested but wants to see a script. So that was the story from him. We know that in the fall of 2019, Jackman did meet with Feige. If I recall, he was literally seen going in. At the same time, it's also believed he talked to Patrick Stewart at the time, and they both said no. That's what came out of that. So this idea then would be that they've gone back to him. Possibly they went back to Patrick Stewart too, although given how hard it is to insure him, I don't know if they did or they didn't. So to me this is plausible. Sutton suggests he could appear in the Deadpool sequel in the MCU, so not the first Ryan Reynolds film, but a second one, and Secret Wars. as an alt Wolverine. That all makes sense to me. Everyone would be happy to see him. He would definitely help box office. So, yeah, plausible. Obviously, we have to wait and see. Next up, a little bit of Miss Marvel casting news. The Express Tribune reports that Pakistani actress Samina Ahmed is filming a Hollywood serial that includes Farhan Akhtar, who the Bollywood star who everyone assumes is in Miss Marvel, because Miss Marvel is filming where they are filming. So this seems quite likely. Given that it's location shooting, though, again, this seems like a one episode, at most two appearance, and probably fairly ephemeral. There's one thing that's been very clear in the two Marvel shows right now, is that Marvel does not want to put significant characters in here unless they are the leads, and that the secondary characters they include are not particularly important or exciting. You know, we're talking marginal people. We're talking Jimmy Woo. We're talking that cameo in episode 5 of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We're talking about characters that if you skip the shows and see the movies, you won't miss those characters being there. So I think that'll be true for Miss Marvel. Although, honestly, for me, for Miss Marvel, it still looks like something to skip entirely. Not that I'll be able to, but hopefully that impression changes. Thank God Loki is next, though. That should be fun. Speaking of Sutton, he did a Q&A. This is mostly Spider-Man focused, but it does have a couple other things here. So first point, he says the MCU will take a slow burn approach with the Spider-Verse. So again, this confused me as a non-Spider-Man person a couple years ago. People kept talking about Spider-Verse. And I was thinking of the animated film. All it really means is the IP related to Spider-Man and its multiverse associations. So Gwenpool, Spider-Gwen, Miles Morales. That's all it really means. So just for any of you who struggle like I used to struggle for what the hell that means, that's what that means. He said Glyph is still coming to Midnight Suns. It's a female character. That's a very old scoop from, God, it's either fall 2019 or even earlier. It's an old scoop. Yeah, so just re-verifying that. So then we have a bunch of stuff from Sutton. A lot of this is reiteration, but it's about a second Spider-Man trilogy with Tim Holland when he's in college. So this idea has been floating around since the summer of 2019. Sutton actually didn't scoop this originally. This came from Lords of the Longbox original source, The Black Knight, who seems to be retired. And it's an R&D list for characters. So it includes the Prowler. I mean, we've seen him before in Homecoming. Gwen Stacy. The plan is to have her be a romance for Miles Morales rather than Peter Parker. Now, I asked Sutton about something he said not long ago, which is that Miles Morales would be the Sony Spider-Man while Peter Parker would be the Marvel Spider-Man. He said things, so he said that, and he seems to be going back on that, but I never received clarification. So I have no idea where he is on that pendulum. For Sony, it would make a lot more sense to have your own Spider-Man as opposed to two in the MCU, but we just don't know. Especially since Tom Holland is so young. Like, he looks younger than he is. Having two young Spider-Man on adventures, I think you're going to worry about IP fatigue there. Especially since Miles has never been even closely as popular as Peter Parker. Anyway, so Captain George Stacy, it kind of makes sense if you're going to Gwen Stacy. Madam Web. So this seems unrelated to the Sony film that was announced 2 years ago. So I don't know if Sutton is implying that film is dead. That seems to be the implication, but food for thought. Okay, Robbie Robertson, just a Daily Bugle reporter. Venom, how this fits in with the films, I have no idea. Jessica Drew. So we've known about the Sony project since August. Although, again, Sony announces a lot of things that never happen. So just because they announce something, even attaching someone to it doesn't mean anything. Reed Richards will appear as his mentor. Now, this used to be Doctor Strange for Sutton, so this has changed. Johnny Storm will be Peter's close friend. He's talked before about how he'll be his roommate. How this relates to the Fantastic Four, I don't know, and he doesn't go into it. Daredevil, they'll pay homage to the Ringmaster. Man-Wolf, that's J. Jonah Jameson's son. I don't know why that's hard to say. Um, and this kind of interesting because last March, so over a year ago, the Illuminati, aka Daniel, aka Production Weekly, said that Sony was developing a film for the character. Again, an announced Sony project that goes nowhere. Firestar, who will also be Peter's roommate in college, according to Sutton. Iceman. Oh, it's... Yeah, I'm having a brain fart there. Iceman will also appear. I have him as his roommate as well. I'm going to have to think about that. I think I may be conflating he and Johnny Storm. At any rate, Norman Osborn, Black Cat, who is a romantic interest for Spider-Man, but doesn't actually like Peter Parker. Sutton talked about this love triangle back in December, saying specifically that Black Cat would appear in the 4th Spider-Man film. Craven, somebody else who had a Sony film announced for him. Sutton said he would be the antagonist of Spider-Man 3 in August. Something got repeated by Casey Walsh in November. Walsh, who doesn't have a huge track record, has been quite accurate in the stuff that he has. Then Miles Morales, of course. And he says after Peter finishes college and gets married, Miles becomes a new Spider-Man. So the idea would be at the end of the second trilogy that Miles will be your Spider-Man. So this again, it implies that his earlier idea that Miles will be the Sony Spider-Man seems off the table, but we don't know how or why. Hobgoblin, and it will be Ned Leeds. Kingpin, they want Vincent D'Onofrio, but haven't approached him. D'Onofrio would certainly do it if the contract was right. Although I love D'Onofrio, but he is starting to get a little old to hold that frame together, I think. But we'll see. Deadpool, sure, why not? But yeah, so that's the R&D list. Certainly Deadpool and Spider-Man in the comics have had plenty of sort of amusing interactions. It's after my time, though. So in the wrap-up to the episode, Sutton mentioned that Marvel was heavily researching Amazing Spider-Man Annual 14. It features Doctor Strange, Doctor Doom, Dormammu, Wong, and a very brief Spider-Man love interest named Deborah Whitman, who is not related to Black Knight. So this, he doesn't know why this could be an R&D thing, and this also could just be related to the fact that Doctor Strange is going to appear in the 3rd film. Who knows? So one of the interesting things I wanted to get into there was Firestar is a romance for him. So very, very clearly with the Michelle character and Feige's disinterest in repeating what's happened before, they're moving away from Mary Jane Watson. Kirsten Dunst played her in the Raimi films, so he just simply didn't want to do it again. And of course, Gwen Stacy was Emma Stone in the Andrew Garfield film. So your two usual suspects for Spider-Man romances were gone. So they went with someone no one had ever heard of in Michelle. But with Firestar, this is a romance that can sort of echo in a way the Mary Jane Watson romance. Another redhead, although of course she has superpowers, so you don't have to worry about I have a feeling Marvel worries about romantic partners where they're not equitable in terms of power. I could be wrong about that. Obviously, it doesn't apply to the original MCU characters for obvious reasons, but I do think that's the kind of thing Marvel might think about. Anyway, it certainly fits. Having a love triangle, that's extremely common. Pretty much any romance film, show, book that has a female demographic, at least, there's usually a love triangle. Now, it's about the girl, not the guy, but you could certainly flip that around and play with that, since Spider-Man is in a lot of ways kind of a YA character. So next up, we have more rumors. We have rumors from our good buddy Daniel. So Daniel, for Daniel reasons, went and beat up, chopped up, changed his dump rumor file, making it exceedingly difficult to figure out where the old stuff ends and the new stuff begins. But I went through a little bit looking for Marvel stuff, and we'll just briefly go through it, even though I think it's largely nonsense. Jane will beat up Thor in Thor 4. That would be very predictable, quite expected, so maybe. I don't know what the point would be, but sure. Doctor Strange will change the MCU forever. Daniel for the win there. Kristen Stewart wanted for superhero roles in DC and Marvel. Sure. Doctor Strange 2 will feature Eternals characters. Why not? Tom Holland wants lots of screen time with Deadpool. So Daniel has included this about once a month. Again, I have no idea why. Marvel exploring making Bucky bi. Sure. I don't know. You could, but why? Sometimes the things Daniel comes out with is pretty funny. Marvel wants Sigourney Weaver in the MCU as a different character than in the Defenders. Well, she would certainly be a different character. Her character in the Defenders was incomprehensibly terrible. But what would you do with her? I have no idea. Could you? Sure. But, what's the draw? Is anyone really showing up for Sigourney Weaver stuff anymore? The answer is no. Wanda will become the most powerful villain in the MCU. This is kind of redundant. She's already the most powerful hero, so why wouldn't she be the most powerful villain? Disney thinking of having both an R and PG version of Deadpool? No. J.K. Simmons will play both iterations of the character, the Sony and MCU version. Maybe? So what is this stuff? Well, this is a mix, I think, of wish fulfillment, clickbait, and speculation. That's what Daniel's dump file is for. I really only go through it just to track trends, to see what's floating around in the fan sphere, especially from other Marvel luminaries like him. It's a reflection of the things that these guys will be talking about. Some of it anyway. Off screen, as it were. Then we have, to wrap things up, we've got some 4chan stuff. We have a thing about Miss Marvel, which I thought was at least plausible, so I'll briefly go through the parts. Miss Marvel is still an Inhuman, no duh. None of the Inhuman Royals are in it, including Lockjaw. There have been rumors the other way. Be interesting to see which way it goes. Certainly in terms of casting, we haven't seen it. Miss Marvel will have a new power besides embiggening, as in the stretchy power that she has, by using purple constructs. The only weapons I can confirm are a shield and dagger. I heard that it relates to an armband she's wearing. If this is true, with a big if, my guess is this would be in order for her to not copy Reed Richards or Cassie Lang to make her power set distinctive. NICE, NICE, is an organization that specifically detains Inhumans. Alicia Reiner will be its supervisor and a villain. Sure. The main villain is Miss Marvel's boyfriend, who is unable to control his newfound power. I hope that's not true. We're almost through 2 Disney Plus shows where we've had limp, anemic villains. I guess John Walker's meant to be the antagonist of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but instead he's just the most interesting character. And in Wanda's the villain, I guess, or I guess Agatha is, but Agatha's villainous persona is terrible. So I don't know. I hope, there used to always be that joke that the MCU had a villain problem in its early films, which I think is unfair. But in terms of the shows, yeah, that's weak. And having her boyfriend be, I don't know. It could work. Good performance, good writing, but I hope that's not true. We then have a very, very long No Way Home post. And I think it's ridiculous. It's bloated, overly complicated. A lot of wish fulfillment from the fertile mind of the poster. It contains little, tidbits from other rumors, but yeah, I see nothing plausible about it. It is just way, way too busy for a single film. It also, I believe, if I recall correctly, I don't think Andrew Garfield's in here at all. It has Ego as one of the villains. It's really bizarre, but I included it again in tracking trends. So I have definitely rambled on long enough. Questions, comments down below, always appreciated. Next up will almost certainly be the Falcon and the Winter Soldier review for episode 5. And I don't know exactly when I'll post this, but I'm going to be on small screen Friday night. So if I post this before then, you'll see me there. If not, you can watch the rerun and enjoy, hopefully. But anyways, until next time, we will see you later.